BS. Some of these trucking companies out there are nothing more than a shell game on wheels. They get in trouble, they get looked at, they get shut down, or they should get shut down. Then boom. Before you know it, they are right back in business with a new company name, a new DOT authority, and come complete with the very same people running the show. And the worst part? After a bad crash, families are left asking, who is going to make things right? Who will pay for our medical bills, and who do we sue? Who even owns this outfit? Where's the insurance?
Legitimate trucking companies everywhere better start being more careful with who they hire, what equipment they buy, and from who. U.S. Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy confirmed that FMCSA investigators were on site this past week at Sam Express, the Illinois-based carrier at the center of a sprawling Chameleon carrier network. It's the very same trucking company linked to a crash in Jay County, Indiana, that killed 4 Amish men. Jim, when truckers hear the term chameleon being used to describe a trucking company, some folks think it's just a buzzword. What does it actually mean?
It's when a carrier gets a bad safety history, violations, out of service, horrible wrecks, then they close up shop on paper and reopen under a new identity. New LLC, new owner, new address. But it's really the same trucking operation, just wearing a different mask.
Let's start things off with a very recent deadly crash involving an illegal immigrant working for a Chameleon trucking company.
Tuesday, February 3rd of 2026, around 4 p.m., on State Road 67 in Jay County, Indiana, police say a big rig truck driver named Begjan Beshakiv, age 30, failed to slow for traffic, swerved into the oncoming lane, and hit a van head-on. 4 people from the same family were in that van along with 2 others. 4 people lost their lives while 2 others were seriously injured. And that's the nightmare right there. 1 moment of reckless driving, and now 4 innocents are dead, leaving 4 families to mourn their loss forever.
So what happens legally after something like this? It only makes sense that the driver will be charged, but is the company also charged? How does that work?
Most of the time, the driver gets hit first. Criminal charges if the facts support it. Reckless driving, negligent homicide, or similar charges depending on the state. But here's where chameleon stuff matters. If the company behind that driver is a paper company, or it's tied to a network, it can turn into a maze for anyone trying to investigate and ask questions. Who really hired the driver? Who really owned the truck? Who really controlled the safety program? And who really carried the insurance?
Now here's the one that should still make the whole industry sick to its stomach.
June 21st, 2019, Route 2 in Randolph, New Hampshire. A truck towing a flatbed trailer, driven by Volodymyr Zhukovsky, age 23, crossed the center line and hit a group of motorcyclists from the Jarheads Motorcycle Club, made up of Marine Corps veterans. 7 people died that day. FreightWaves reports Zhukovsky had been hired by Westfield Transport just 2 days earlier, and the reporting describes this operation as tied to a wider network that investigators believe operated like a chameleon enterprise, affiliated carriers scattered into the shadows. FreightWaves documented a network of interconnected carriers operating approximately 800 trucks out of shared terminal facilities in the Chicago metropolitan area. The network includes Sam Express Corp., Tutash Express, KG Line Group, AJ Partners LLC, Altex Logistics, DVL Express, Vidma, Tutash Express 1, Tutash Cargo LLC, and First Choice Logistics.
So did the company owners actually get hammered with any penalties? I read where one of these chameleon companies named Tutash Express has recorded 57 crashes and over the course of 1,800 inspections had a significantly high violation rate. Across this particular chameleon trucking network, we're looking at nearly 100 crashes combined.
That's the part that burns people up. With regard to the crash that occurred in Randolph, New Hampshire, FreightWaves reported that one owner got 2 months for systematic fraud and hiring a driver he allegedly knew had substance abuse problems, while the NTSB described his actions as egregious non-compliance. And as of January 15th of 2026, FreightWaves reports the co-owner D'Artagnan Gasanov is scheduled for trial starting March 2nd of 2026 on federal falsification of records charges tied to logbook entries. That's not nothing, but compared to 7 dead Marines, people look at it and ask, is this really the best we can do?
Here's what people really want to know. How can a shady trucking operation get a new DOT number so easily?
Because a lot of the front end is built on applications, paperwork, and self-reported info. FMCSA's process includes applying through the Unified Registration System, and to get a new authority, there's a $300 fee per authority request. Then to actually operate, they have to show required filings, especially insurance filings, like BMC 91, through the FMCSA insurance system. So what do Chameleon outfits do? First thing they do is create a new LLC, which they put into somebody else's name, usually a friend or girlfriend, or maybe a cousin, whoever they can get to sign. Then they use the new contact info to file for a new authority. Sometimes they get a bare minimum insurance policy. However, they more often than not end up playing games with insurance filings. And poof, before you know, they're right back hauling freight again.
So why didn't someone in the FMCSA, the DOT, or anyone in the application process catch this type of false activity and put a stop to it?
Because catching chameleon carriers means connecting dots across multiple identities, and that's harder than it sounds. However, the main reason this type of illegal activity continues to happen is due to a combination of high application volume, limited resources, sophisticated fraud tactics, and gaps in the enforcement process. Look at the Shaquan Jelks case in Texas. The DOJ says he allegedly managed and controlled multiple trucking companies, even after being ordered not to, and repeatedly lied to and obstructed the FMCSA, including after a driver for one of his companies was killed in a February 2022 single-vehicle crash. That's part of the playbook these scammers and fraudsters use. They hide ownership, obstruct investigators, and keep forming new entities. If the system relies heavily on what people submit, and bad actors are willing to lie, you need strong cross-checking, staffing, and enforcement to keep up and actually catch these people.
Now let's talk money. Victims' families always ask, who pays?
The FMCSA requires minimum liability coverage for most property hauling trucking companies, commonly $750,000 for non-hazardous carriers with a gross weight over 10,000 pounds. So in a normal world, the carrier's liability insurer pays for damages, up to policy limits. Then it's up to the injured party to file lawsuits or engage in settlement talks to make them whole in the eyes of the law.
Yeah, Jim, but how does it work in the real world if you are involved in an incident with one of these chameleon trucking companies? What if they're broke, dissolved, or their insurance is sketchy?
Here's the ugly truth, Bernie. If there's a valid insurance policy, the insurer is usually the first pocket that gets emptied out. However, if the accident coverage is denied or the trucking company at fault disappears, victims may still sue the driver and the carrier. Now the bad news, if the carrier has no assets, winning a judgment won't magically create money. What is called an MCS 90 can come into play in some situations. Many regulated carriers have an MCS 90 endorsement, which is designed to protect the public, sometimes requiring an insurer to pay a judgment even when the policy wouldn't otherwise cover it, and then the insurer can seek reimbursement from the carrier. Sometimes lawsuits end up expanding to brokers, shippers, or others under claims like negligent hiring selection, but that depends on the facts and the state law.
And that is why legal trucking companies should be on the lookout and report any chameleon carriers they happen to come into contact with. These shady BS trucking outfits can jack up accident risk out on the highway and cause increases in insurance premiums for everybody in the industry.
Bingo! That's exactly right, Bernie. I will say this, no matter what your political leanings are, gotta give the Trump administration credit for trying to make needed changes to the FMCSA and DOT. In May of 2025, Secretary Duffy signed an order strengthening enforcement of English language proficiency. And since then, more than 12,000 drivers have been placed out of service for failing to comply. By December of 2025, 7,500 CDL training schools had been shut down, which is nearly half of all schools on the training provider registry, for failing to meet readiness standards. The agency also removed nearly 3,000 training providers and placed another 4,500 under investigation in what FMCSA called the largest enforcement action ever against low-quality CDL training programs. This is not an administration that is sitting on its hands. This is the fastest and most decisive regulatory enforcement action I have ever seen in the transportation sector in my lifetime, period. And goodness knows, this is a crackdown that is way past due.
Well, my friends, keep the shiny side up and the rubber side down. We are trying to grow this channel to help truck drivers along with educating the general public. You can help us out by smashing that like button and the notification bell. Remember to subscribe and share this with another driver.
Protect your load, protect your rig, and protect yourself. Leave us a comment below with your thoughts and ideas about this topic. If it's a good idea, we will share it with everyone. Subscribe for more trucking truth, and together we'll keep hammering this issue till somebody listens.